Christus vincit, Christus regnat, Christus imperat. The repeated refrain of the Laudes Regii, hymn of the Catholic Church. Christ victorious, Christ reigns, Christ commands. I have to admit I feel a little bit weird about having it on a sword. Now, given my years of studying religion, I could certainly attach it to, shall we say, the dark history of Christianity and, well, any absolutist exclusive version of, well, any world religion tends to go down this path. But letting go of that, I'm still kind of left with having Christ commands on my sword. Now, it is a replica of an example in the Tower of London in the Royal Armouries, and it's apparently a very good one. We'll talk about that in a second. But I feel like my sword says, what would Jesus do? And again, from my history of studying the subject, I feel like, well, Jesus would say, put the thing away. Or at least say, well, protect yourself, defend other people, and try not to kill anybody. I can kind of attach it to my experience in Japanese swordsmanship and martial arts to the concept of Katsujin Ken, the life-giving sword, turning something that is primarily designed to be dangerous into something creative, positive, life-affirming. Kind of like me. So, let's talk about the sword. Okay, my mini semi-spiritual crisis out of the way, let's talk about the Windlass Christus Imperat Rapier. It's early, I'm tired, seems like the ideal time to give you my first impressions. This sword's gotten a lot of good reviews, and some people have called it the best rapier that Windlass has made. And I'm going to disagree with that and compare it to my Windlass Musketeer that I am quite impressed with. Now, what's wrong with it? Well, the first thing is not the sword's fault. That would be me. I'm a short guy, and at least what I've researched in terms of determining a good length of rapier blade, this one comes out about 1.5 inches, 2 inches too long for me. So finding my fingertips, finding my navel, yeah, 1.5 inches, 2 inches too long, which is about how much longer it is than the Musketeer, which is kind of at the top end of what would be considered a comfortable length range. So might have to cut this down, and I'm not terribly sad about it for, well, a couple of other reasons. Let's talk about specs. Like I said, it's a little bit longer. 38.5-inch blade from the guard, but there's a 2.5-inch ricasso inside that shell. So 41 inches overall. That's where that additional length is coming from. Weight on the Musketeer, which I consider a beefy beast, is 3 pounds 1 ounce. This is 3 pounds 5. Okay. Point of balance from the shell is 1.25 inches, but again, there's extra room in here, so 3 3/4 inches from the cross guard. So slightly blade forward, maybe. But those aren't my significant issues with the build of the sword. Where am I having issues? Well, first of all, take a look at this. Now, this does have a fuller running almost its entire length. I would say more than 3/4, but it is a diamond cross-section and thicker than the Musketeer. But let's look at flex first, okay? More towards the tip, but yeah, with not too much pressure on the blade, it's a pretty good amount of flex. Now, this sword did not come sharpened, so it's going to need some work. We'll get back to that in a second. Let's take a look at the Musketeer, which has a pretty thin, wide, it's a really nice cutting blade. Okay. But a lot less flex. And a bit more focus towards the tip. So, same amount of pressure, getting less curve out of it. That's not where it stops, though. This is what's really kind of bothering me. If I extend the sword with the blade held horizontally, this one has, well, a little bit of spring to it, not too bad. But, yeah, edge side to side, it stays pretty straight under its own weight. This one, however, if I hold it the same way, yeah, there's a whole lot more bounce. And I don't know if you're going to be able to see it, but it's definitely enough to bother me. That blade is sagging under its own weight. And if I keep talking about how my sword is sagging, yeah, I'm probably going to start getting those ads for those special pills. So, going to have to do something about that. Like I said, it hasn't been sharpened, so I'm going to go ahead and do some reprofiling on the diamond cross-section, try to give it an edge. Probably won't cut as well as the Musketeer, but maybe better than the Cold Steel Cavalier. So I might be able to do some cutting, and then, yeah, I'm probably going to put a different tip on it. Take about an inch, inch and a half off, so to be continued. But let's take a look at the friendly end. There's a couple more problems here. It's attractive. It's got a nice semi-blackened finish on it. The engraving on the shell, the peacocks, is actually quite attractive. I'll get you some close-up shots of that. Same with the wire wrap. Turk's heads top and bottom, multiple wire braid. It's pretty attractive. It is, however, significantly longer and even beefier than the Musketeer. I'll hold them this way side by side. Yeah, you can see there's a whole lot more pommel south of the hand. Not such a bad thing for me, but yeah, let's talk about the crossguard and all the sharp edges. This sword kind of tells me to not pick it up. What am I talking about? Well, there is no tube around the ricasso, and that's fine. I have other swords that are like that. There's nothing wrong with that, but the edges on that ricasso are extremely sharp. Even with a glove on, it's uncomfortable. But worse, if you look at the bars, they're pretty well done, but when you look really close, you're going to start seeing some casting flaws. It is magnetic metal, so probably some kind of steel, so that's promising. But all of the shapes are these squared diamonds with the edges facing side to side and top and bottom. It's probably the worst orientation I can think of. Now, I did have issue with that Musketeer having a square block in the middle of the cross with some serrations on it that I had to round off. This one, however, every edge on these bars is sharp and pointing straight into one of my fingers. Even with a glove on, uncomfortable. So I'm going to have to do some rounding, and I've already started doing that. However, the bars I don't know if they're going to be as strong after I finish doing that. So again, to be continued. Let's take a look at the scabbard. The good and the bad. The throat and the chape are metal, blackened to match the hilt, and they've got some nice little detail on them. But I noticed no hook or stud for a Frogger belt. It is leather, not reinforced, so it is floppy. Fit, other than the fact, again, when I go to resheath the thing, it's in another zip code. Fits pretty good. Blade shape, I'm definitely going to need to be a little bit careful with it. Like I said, diamond cross section, nice fuller. The blade shape it's pretty well done. So that's not a problem, and I do kind of dig the engraving on it, even though the message is a little bit potentially mixed. But yeah, I think the sword has a lot of potential. Just out of the box, several things really aren't doing it for me. So I'm off to the sander and to be continued. Okay, spent about a day and a half working on this thing. What did I do? What was the result? Well, the first thing was, yes indeed, I took pretty much a full 2 inches off the tip and reshaped it. Result of that is, yes, at least for how I have learned how to measure an appropriate rapier blade for my stubby self, it certainly is shorter than a lot of traditional ones, but yeah, it's right in that comfort zone for me. We'll talk about how it handles in a second. Because the other thing I did was, well, I had to take off a significant amount of steel to put an edge on it. Now, it certainly had the potential for that. Those edge planes on the diamond, yeah, they're about 35-40 degrees, so it's not bad. However, yeah, it took me a while on my 4x36 sander. I started with 120 grit, worked my way all the way up to 1,000. And then today I went back out and ran it through my work sharp, just to give it that extra something something. The final result is, well, it cuts pretty good. Not necessarily as well as the Musketeer, certainly not as well as some of my more cut dedicated swords, but enough that I'm quite pleased with it. So cuts paper, cuts cardboard, cuts milk bottles. I didn't do a lot with it. But in the process of edging it, I did do some, shall we say, staged cuts here and there to see how it was doing, which weren't good. And result of that, of course, means that the sword had to take some impact. If it doesn't cut through a target, it is absorbing all of that. And in all of that abuse, nothing has loosened up yet. So I'm pretty pleased. What else has changed with all that metal being removed? Well, weight. I've actually removed 2 ounces of steel from the blade. So 3 pounds 5 ounces, now down to 3 pounds 3. Point of balance was 1 1/4 inches off the shell. Now it's at 7/8. Okay, really close to the shell. Flex, well, obviously that didn't really affect the flex all that much. It is more flexible than the Musketeer, and certainly a lot more flexible than the Cavalier. And yeah, there's still a little bit of flop there. But check this out. I'm not noticing nearly as much sag under its own weight. The change in the weight, the change in the balance, and especially the change in the flop of the blade, yeah, this is a lot more comfortable, a lot more maneuverable. I feel like I've got a lot more point control and a surprising amount of accuracy with it. So much more pleased with it. Let's talk about the grippy end. Like I said, everything stayed nice and tight. I did round the corners on this, and it is a full width ricasso, by the way. Pretty sturdy. And yeah, I did take off a significant amount of those corners here, here, and a little bit there and there. So better. Now I haven't finished doing like final polish yet, but I think it's pretty close to where I'm loving it. So now, compared to when I got it out of the box, I'm quite pleased with it. So, let's get the conversation going in the comments. Was this useful information? Were you considering buying this or a similar rapier? Do you have this or a similar rapier? Love having those conversations. Perfectly happy to answer any questions you might have. You may certainly see this again in other demonstrations or comparisons. But until then, as always, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again.